The Dodgy Doctor. I was 12 years old, and I come down with a suspected case of glandular fever. So Mom booked me in with our family GP. Mom loved him. He had delivered my sister 8 years earlier, and we have been seeing him ever since. Mom and I are in the waiting room. She's flipping through the crappy magazines, and I'm just watching the fish in the tank. The receptionist pops her head out to call my name, so Mom turns to me and says, "You're old enough now to go in by yourself." A bad feeling hits the pit of my stomach. I shake my head and insist she come with me. There was never a nurse or anyone else present during appointments, and there was no way I was going in alone. Now, nothing weird had ever happened with our doctor before. He was always professional and kind, but this time I felt uneasy. He was checking my lymph nodes for inflammation. The neck ones were all swollen. Then he checked my armpits, swollen too. I'm getting a weird vibe, a bad vibe, like he was enjoying it. Mom didn't notice. Finally, he checks my groin, swollen. I was very uncomfortable with him by this point. It just felt weird, gut feeling bad. Diagnosis, glandular fever. We left, and I didn't say anything about the experience. A couple months later, our doctor abruptly left the practice. The new doctor was a lovely lady, so I breathed a sigh of relief to see him gone. 4 years later, Mom comes into my room. "Remember Dr. Gardner? Well, he's in jail for molesting his friend's kids while they were away on a holiday." She tells me with surprise. No shit. I related my experiences to her. She was shocked, had no idea. That was weird in itself, as Mom has had premonitions over the years. So glad I insisted that Mom accompany me in with the pedo doctor. Could have been a lot worse than just a bad gut feeling. Creepy orthodontist. This happened yesterday, and I'm still a little creeped out by it. So, I've had crooked teeth my whole life, and I really hadn't minded that much. We couldn't afford braces, so I haven't been to an orthodontist at all. Well, recently, my insurance let us know that if I needed braces, they would pay for most of the cost. It's state insurance, so we were surprised. My mom jumped at the offer, saying I should straighten my teeth while I had the chance before I'm a legal adult. So, this was my first trip to the orthodontist. I should preface by saying that this office was tiny and looked like an old trailer attached to the side of a larger building. We checked in, were led to a room. Everything seemed pretty normal. Well, before he even comes into the room, I hear the orthodontist ask his assistant, "What about tonight? Do you want to go to dinner tonight?" Sounding annoyed, she replied, "No, someone is picking me up after work." It sounded like this has happened before. When he came into the room, the first thing he said was, "What a cute kid like you do in a place like this." Okay. My mom glanced at me for a minute before talking to the doctor. He just straight up staring at me the whole time while she talks to him. He crosses the room to look at the pictures of my teeth. He says, "You have beautiful, beautiful teeth." I took it as a compliment the first few times he said it, even after 5 times saying it, until he said, "Man, I wish those were in my mouth." The commentary after this was equally as weird. He kept saying things like, "You're already beautiful. Why do you need straight teeth?" And, "We can't make your teeth straight. You'd have to beat off the boys with a stick." Exact words. Keep in mind that this man is 70 plus and I'm 16 years old. I look young for my age, even. This comment was the one that really kind of topped everything off. He puts his gloves on, and these were his exact words. "Okay, I'm gonna slap my fingers in your mouth now. I know they taste good, and you can lick, but you can't bite." Then he giggled. What the fuck? It didn't really get creepier than that, but I don't really know how it could. He talked to my mom for a few minutes about my dentist, said I had beautiful teeth a few more times, and finally left. I don't know if I'm overreacting or misinterpreting, but this really freaked me out. My mom wants me to see another orthodontist, but we can't because of our insurance. If I can figure out a way to see a new one, creepy orthodontist guy, let's not meet again. Doctor No. I was a young nursing student doing clinical portions of my training in a hospital with loads of young medical students, residents, and interns. There was a lot of dating and flirting between the young doctors and nurses. It was harmless fun. Mostly. One day, I'm caring for my patients, and this resident comes into the room to see the patient. To clarify, a resident doctor is a person who has completed medical school and are now completing the clinical portion of their training, which is usually 1 to 3 years depending on specialty. The resident visits the patients, then comes back with the attending physician to write orders. So this resident comes in and automatically, my creep meter goes off. He's wearing shirt, tie, and lab coat. This is around the time when Viagra was just coming out, and his tie had the pattern of a bunch of little Viagra pills. And he has about 3 pens with a Viagra logo in his lab coat front pocket. Side note, I never understood why all the guys were so cuckoo over the Viagra stuff from the reps back then. I mean, Viagra is for older men who need help getting it up, so what's that saying about the 30-year-olds so excited with the Viagra ties and pens? I see the Viagra gear and automatically think to myself, here we go. Immediately, he's flirtatious, asking me questions about the patient while overtly looking me up and down. No offense to anyone reading this, but he was of Middle Eastern descent, and I always found those doctors to be overtly sexual and aggressive with the nurses. I am of Middle Eastern descent as well, but you most likely wouldn't be able to tell by looking at me. Time goes on, and I continue to see him daily, and he continues to flirt. I keep it polite, and he eventually asks me to lunch. I keep making excuses for about a week or so, and he is so persistent. I finally agreed to have lunch with him in the hospital cafeteria. He doesn't want to eat the cafeteria food because he always eats the cafeteria food. Besides, a woman like me deserves to eat somewhere nice, not the hospital cafeteria. So I agree we can lunch at this little cafe, a little ways from the hospital. We can actually walk there, it's in that distance. I won't bore with the details, but he insists on driving, and I'm in this far, so I finally just relent. What could possibly go wrong? We are both well known at the hospital. It's not like he's gonna kidnap me or anything like that, right? I'm waiting in front of the hospital for him to pull his car around. He rolls up in a shiny black Mustang, opens the passenger door from inside with the biggest smile. Hop in! I get in, feeling a little uneasy. All we need to do is exit the parking lot, go to the first light, turn left, and we're there. Except we get to the first stoplight, and he turns right. Hey, you're turning the wrong way. No, I thought we have lunch somewhere else. Where? A place right up here. Where? My place. With a shit-eating grin on his face. By now, we are really far away from the hospital in the opposite direction that we should be, and we are stopped at a light in the turning lane. He has his blinker on to turn into his apartment complex. I start screaming, "Turn this fucking car around now, motherfucker," and all sorts of obscenities. I keep trying to unlock the door, and he keeps locking it with the automatic lock, so I start beating on the windows. He sees how freaked out I am, and starts to backpedal and try to calm me down. He turns the car in the right direction, and pulls into the front of the hospital, and I jumped out, ran inside. I was embarrassed. I felt stupid for even putting myself in that goddamn situation. I told some of the other nursing students, and we had a system for watching out for him. When he would come to the floor, I would hide in the med room until he was gone. I only had a couple more weeks on that rotation, and then I changed hospitals. Not long after that, I found out one of the other students in my class had been involved with him, only she was actually dating him. She stopped dating him after she discovered, through his roommate, that he actually had a wife and kids in his home country. We both went to nursing administration and shared our stories about this resident. It turned out he had been in trouble for harassing nurses in the past, and he was eventually removed from the program. So, creepy nurse stalker, let's not meet again. Not the doctor, the vet from hell. Okay, so, as a lover of all things creepy, I've read Let's Not Meet off and on for years, but thankfully never really had a reason to post. Although come to think of it, there is another story from my childhood worth posting. But that's neither here nor there. I recently made a Reddit account, but as I said, up until now, I have not had a reason to post here, which probably sounds super cliche, but hey, I guess it's not until something happens and you think, shit, this is Let's Not Meet level creepy, that you think to post here, so here we go. Last Sunday at around 11 p.m., I was simultaneously working in my home office, FaceTiming with my mom and cooking dinner. I live in an Altbau, old building in Germany, in Berlin, so the windows only open inside, and we do not have screens. I had the windows open in the kitchen as we don't have AC, and it was pretty hot nights. I was by myself, as my boyfriend was at work, at a vegan restaurant about 20 minutes away. The kitchen window was open, and my cats often like to sit on the windowsill as there is a decent amount of space for them to do so. The flat is also L-shaped, so the kitchen window forms a corner with a bedroom window. One of my cats, Hex, enjoys jumping back and forth between these two windowsills. I usually let her do it because she is a cat, and I don't want to prevent her from doing her cat-ly things. Side note, never again will I let her do those cat-like things. As I was FaceTiming my mom and multitasking the hell out of my life, she had jumped to the bedroom windowsill, so I went into the bedroom to let her back inside, as that window was not open, which I normally do. When I went to open the window, I somehow spooked her, so she tried to jump back to the kitchen windowsill but missed and fell 4 stories if you're American down. I saw her slip and then looked away because I couldn't bear the thought of seeing her dead on the pavement in the backyard below. I screamed something inaudible about my cat to my mom, hung up FaceTime, and then apprehensively looked out the window only to see her scurry under the hut that contains the garbage cans, grab my house keys, and with my cell phone still in my hand, ran barefoot down the stairs and into the backyard. As I was losing my shit, Hex, who had by then tucked herself under a bike, was meowing like crazy, as was my other cat, who I could see silhouetted on the 3rd and 4th story kitchen window ledge of the kitchen, meowing her head off as well. My whole body was shaking, and I was thinking to myself how shit I apparently was in panicky situations. I shakily googled emergency vet in German, called the first number that popped up, but got no answer. I then called the second number, and a man picked up. Now, I have lived in Berlin for 8 years, but I am originally from the USA, so I speak fluent German, but it is still not my native language, and I'm still not acquainted to how every little goddamn thing works in this country, especially when I'm shitting bricks and thinking my cat is about to die. The guy on the phone was really odd, but I just thought he had that typical unfriendly attitude, relatively infamous for Berliners, so I just went with it. He kept telling me to remain calm and to get a taxi and to come to his address. I told him I found his address when I found his number, but he told me to call back when I got my things from upstairs and was ready to take her to him. He kept telling me, "In the calm you find your strength," and it was not good for the animal to rush her like that. He also told me I had to pay cash. I told him all I wanted to do was bring her to him, and that I would leave her with him, and then go to a flippin' ATM. He said no, he would not accept that, and that I had to drive by an ATM on the way, and it usually costs around $100 euros. Being the panic moron that I was like, okay, fine. So I brought my cat upstairs, closed the kitchen windows, took what felt like a million years to get to the cat carrier down from the top shelf in a closet, as I am short, and the closest door was pinned behind a desk, and put my cat in the carrier, and called the man back. He gave me an address, and said in the internet his old address was listed. He also told me to call when I reached his location, when my cat and I then got into a taxi, and were on our way for what felt like an eternity, before stopping at the bank, where I manically searched for my ATM card in a bag full of shit, because what is organization anyways, right? I finally got my card after rummaging through the contents of my bag between loyalty stamp cards, receipts, Rizlas, filters, and God knows what else, while screaming and crying to myself, took out the 150, hopped back into the taxi, and were on our way. When we finally arrived, I paid the taxi, got out, and called the man back. He had originally given me the address of a house on a street, but when I called, he instructed me not to ring any bells, as it was 11 p.m. at night, on a Sunday, and to go to the 2 double doors to the left of the address in which I was given. There was no signage on the door, but suddenly they opened, and a stern-looking middle-aged German man wearing green scrubs opened the door. I brought Hex inside. Now, I want to take a second to explain how this clinic looked. First of all, it was a garage in the middle of a row of flats, with no signage to be opened that specified this was an emergency vet clinic. Inside, right when you walked in, there was a makeshift waiting room with an array of ragtag chairs that looked to be picked up from the street, typical for Berlin, so that wasn't even the weird part, to be honest. And further inside, there was an animal gurney in the middle of the room, and a counter to the left with vials and papers on it. It basically looked like an unfinished basement, and behind the main room across the gurney was an exposed doorway that was covered up by a thick, opaque plastic sheet. By now you're probably thinking, why didn't I just get the hell out of there and fast? As I said, I am not from Germany, and never in my life have I need to go to an emergency vet. So I thought that this guy just had a night clinic he worked in out of the goodness of his heart and had a proper office in the daytime, you know? I was also panicking and crying at this moment and not really thinking rationally. I just wanted my pet to be saved. Anyways, he had me set the cat carrier down on the gurney and then opened the box. He asked me if she was normally loving and kind, and I said, yes. He started to examine her, then commanded me to hold her down firmly while he examined her back legs. He touched something that made her very unhappy, and she responded by biting down like a vice on my hand. I had 7 puncture marks. I later found out during my trip to the ER, but more on that later, and blood was streaming everywhere. He yelled at me and said, if I had said he was not lib, he would have given me gloves. He also forbade me to panic and told me to remain calm and gave me a paper towel soaked in some liquid to press down on my wound. At this point, Hex has sprung from the table and hid under the counter to the left side. Now, you're also probably wondering why at this point it was not obvious to me that this guy was a certified madman. Well, as I said, in Berlin and Germany in general for us American expats, this kind of gruff behavior is kind of typical in Germany and is usually chalked up to being a difference in culture. So I just thought he was being a normal German. No offense, German Redditors, I love you all, but did think he was slightly off at the moment. The thing is, this guy was convincing as fuck and kept admonishing me in a way that made me feel like a kid in school who did something wrong. Anyways, he got Hex back up on the gurney and told me he could no longer examine her, but that he was pretty sure her pelvis was broken. He gave her a shot of some concoction and also gave me 2 liquids, one to give to her orally and one to put on her open wounds, the same stuff I had on that paper towel wrapped under my bleeding hand. I asked him if it was like iodine, and he said that it was better than iodine. During this time, I noticed 2 burners on the counter that were ringing, and he would pick up when they rang and instructed the person, presumably another pet owner in a panic state with an injured animal on the other end, to do the same as me. I tried to make small talk with him, and he told me he didn't do x-rays and had people paying cash because too many people had skipped out on bills before. He told me about how he did an operation for a dog and was owed around $2,000 that he never saw. I asked him about Hex and if she would live, and he basically said it made 0 sense to bring her to another vet, and if she lived through the night, to bring her to one the next day. He told me based on the fact that she was still alive after an hour of being there, it was a decent sign she would live, and that she only had a broken pelvis. He then gave me a number and a name to a person to take her to. He said he was a private vet, but reputable. He also said not to bring her anywhere else that evening because there are heartless people out there who will just take your money. During this time too, my boyfriend, who I had called in a panic state, called me back, and I told him I'd be in Pankow, a part of Berlin, and I'd be home soon. I paid the man, gave him my name and address, signed some paper without even really reading it, took the medicines he gave me, and left. As I left his clinic, he told me to call him if I had any questions. After 80, and visibly shaken with a very injured cat, I wandered up the street until I found a taxi and got in and went back home. When I got there, my concerned boyfriend and I talked about the whole ordeal. I told him how fucking weird the whole situation was. I called my mom, and we all agreed to get a second opinion. We found a vet clinic in the internet and went there. We learned that with that height of a fall, she definitely needed an x-ray, and spent the next few hours until morning waiting to hear of her fate. While at the clinic, the vet, a real one this time, took one look at my swollen hand and told me I needed to go to the ER ASAP, as cat bites are deadly. Had I listened to the original man, my cat would have already been dead, and God knows what would have happened to me. After leaving the vet hours later, and my boyfriend ended up in the ER where they gave me a wound bad, gave me an antibiotic, drip via IV, a tetanus shot, antibiotics, and take the following days, and the name of a doctor for a follow-up appointment, as well as a splint, which I'm now wearing until Saturday, when I go for my second checkup. My thumb is still pretty much numb. The next day when I was calmer and thinking about how odd the situation was in which I had encountered, I tried to do some research online, as the whole thing just did not sit well with me. At first I did not find much as this guy, and then tried googling him based on the number I called, as the guy also went by a few names, but eventually stumbled across more than one online news site with this guy's face plastered across it, and text explaining that this guy was not a vet and had been arrested 3 fucking times. I even found a Facebook group dedicated to putting this guy behind bars, and a news segment about a couple who were conned by him and lost their dog due to his negligence. There was even a video about it. Unfortunately, it never aired, as it had scheduled day conflict with a tragedy in Manchester. I filed a police report and called the police a few days later. I was told he has never gone after any previous victims after expressing my concerns about him having my address, and was also told that it made no sense to sue him in civil court because he has no money, but that they are working to put him behind bars again, and that 20 or 30 so people have filed reports against him, police reports. I told the police I would happily testify in a court as a witness. He had been the cause of numerous pet-related deaths, but I was the first human that was also injured due to his negligence. This guy has seriously lost the plot ages ago. The medicine he gave me was some weird homeopathic stuff. I don't care about the money, and Hex is doing really well at the real vet, but I don't want this guy hurting anyone, animal or human, ever again. I can't believe I was alone with a madman at 11 p.m. on a Sunday for an hour in total, and I can only think that because I didn't get mad or question him. I am okay. The cops said they had never gone after a person, but after that cat bite, what if I freaked him out and he got scared about me suing and killed me then and there? No one knew where I was apart from my boyfriend, and he only knew I was in a general part of the city. What if I had a dog with me and the bite was even more severe and bled to death? This guy is life-threatening to humans and to animals. So, that's my story. I honestly can't even believe it happened to me. And if I heard this story from someone else, I would scarce believe it. If anyone wants more proof on this whole matter, I can provide that. Now, I know this is Let's Not Meet, but I do want to meet this guy again, in a courtroom, telling the judge about the horrible things he has done, and that he should stay behind bars for good this time. That, or I would like to personally be the one to throw him in a den of lions and then turn my back on him for good.